Welcome to February, everybody! Woohoo! Seeing as January is now over, it seemed the perfect time that I should do a January wrap-up, so let's get into it. The first book that I read in January was Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and this was such a brilliant book to choose to start off my 2014 with. It is so fantastically written, and then again it is Neil Gaiman, so I love Neil Gaiman. Basically, this book has been described as a dark contemporary Alice in Wonderland, and I would completely agree with that description. Our protagonist in this, Richard Mayhew's world is kind of turned upside down when he finds this young girl bleeding on the pathway and decides to help her, and he kind of falls through the cracks of London into the other London, and the setting, the way things are described, it's beautiful, and it's almost kind of, the other London almost kind of reminds me of a kind of Victorian England, almost kind of steampunkish element to it. It's a brilliant book, and if you love kind of alternate world, sci-fi, fantasy, pick this up because it is amazing. The next book that I then read was Attachments by Rainbow Rowell, and again this is a really kind of cute, light-hearted, fluffy contemporary, but that by no means doesn't mean that it was badly written or that it wasn't brilliant, because it was all those things. This is basically about a young guy called Lincoln who is a very studious type, and he works within computer security for a newspaper, and he starts getting a bit too involved in this email conversation going back and forth between two friends that work in the newspaper called Beth and Jennifer, and he becomes a little bit too engrossed and too involved, more so than he should, and then things start to get interesting. Oddly, it's written like it is in an email, so it's kind of written in a correspondence, and I thought that was really going to annoy me, but it actually doesn't. So definitely, if you're looking for a lighter, light-hearted, feel-good, fluffy read, definitely try this, because it's fluffy without being badly written, and Rainbow Rowell is really fantastic. The next book that I then picked up was The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. Yes, Eugenides. This book for me is going to be a bit of a controversial opinion. I know most people on BookTube community absolutely love this book, and I completely see why they do, because it is beautifully written. It's very kind of dreamlike and very lyrical in the way it's written. It's beautiful. It's beautifully written. The subject matter for me, however, was a bit hard to handle in a way. I started reading this at the end of November, December time, and during that period I was kind of going through a bit of I was feeling a bit down, and I wasn't feeling the best, and I had to put this book down. I couldn't continue on with it because it was just too heavy for the point in my life that I was going through at that moment. But because I got into about 2 chapters, I decided to pick it up again in January because I wanted to read it and give it a fair go. And it's beautifully written. It is beautifully written. It's just the subject matter to me is too heavy. The premise of this story is of these group of boys who are kind of telling us about in a kind of investigative way of the last few years of a group of sisters called the Lisbon Sisters. Inevitably, these young girls all commit suicide pretty much at the same time, and the boys kind of go back to investigate why these girls did what they did. And the fact that these girls committed suicide is not a spoiler. It is very much laid out at the beginning of this book that the girls commit suicide. I mean, the book is called The Virgin Suicides, so it's pretty kind of obvious. It is beautifully written. I think maybe if I read it again at some other point I will love it more. Definitely read it if you think that it's a topic matter that you're going to cope with. I think it was just, I chose to read it at a bad time, and I think if I reread it at a different time I will like it a lot better. Because The Virgin Suicides was so heavy, I then wanted a book that was hopefully going to cheer me back up, so I decided to pick up An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. John Green is a brilliant writer. I love the way John Green writes. This book is about a teenage boy called Colin Singleton, who is kind of a child prodigy. He is very bright and intelligent. However, he seems to have a great deal of bad luck when it comes to girls called Catherine. Whenever Catherine 19 decides to break up with him, he decides to go on a road trip and rediscover himself. It's actually a really brilliant book. It's a book that kind of shows you that not all hope is lost, even when it feels like it is. It is just an awesome book, and it definitely cheered me up after reading The Virgin Suicides. The last book that I fully got to read in January was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I recently did a book review on this book, as you all may have seen, and if not, I will link it down below. If you have seen that video, you will know how much I love this book. I adore this book. It's a book set in late 1930s, early 1940s Nazi Germany, and is narrated to us by death, following the life of a young girl called Liesel Memminger, as she is now being fostered by a new family, and that family ends up getting themselves into an interesting situation themselves by hiding a Jewish fistfighter in their basement. To me, this book is a beautiful and perfect example of all aspects of humanity that lived during that period, and the people that wanted to fight against the oppression that they were feeling, the people that were not ready or willing to die, and how there could still be joy and how people still lived during this period amongst all this horror that was around them. And it's beautiful, it's beautifully written, it is so descriptive, full of imagery. If you want a better analysis of this and you haven't seen my book review yet, then I will link it down below. Go check it out for a more in-depth review, but it's amazing and you should read it, and read it before the movie comes out if you have not already. So unfortunately I only got to read 5 books this month. I would have liked to have read a bit more. I got midway reading through Percy Jackson and The Last Olympian, which is the last book in the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan, but unfortunately I didn't quite get completing it in time. Hopefully I will get it finished tonight. So they were the 5 books that I read this January, and that was my January wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed having a little sneak peek into seeing what I read this past month. If you did like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. That would be brilliant and awesome, and if you would like to see more content like this, then please do subscribe and join our little family. That would be brilliant also. And as always, links to my other social media will be listed down below if you would like to see me on a different platform. And until the next video guys, bye. And that family ends up getting themselves into an interesting situation themselves by hiding a Jewish so hard to say.